We're delighted and honored to be hosting the launch event for an important new book, the Echoing Ida Collection. Yay! Published by our friends at Feminist Press. This book is edited by Cynthia R. Greenlee, Kemi Alabi, and Janna A. Zinzi. Founded in 2012, Echoing Ida is a writing collective of Black women and non-binary writers who, like their foremother and mighty ancestor Ida B. Wells-Barnett, believes that the way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. Their community reporting spans a wide variety of topics such as reproductive justice and abortion politics, new and necessary definitions of familia, trans visibility, stigma against Black motherhood, Black mental health, and much, much more. With us tonight, we are so feliz and proud, the co-editors of the Echoing Ida collection, Dr. Cynthia Greenlee. We're going to read some bios now. Dr. Greenlee will be joined by Jordan Scruggs and Alicia M. Walters, y'all. Dr. Greenlee is a historian, journalist, and senior editor at The Counter, a publication about the politics, business, and culture of food. She is the winner of a 2020 James Beard Foundation Award for Excellence in Food Writing. Her writing has been anthologized in Best American Food Writing and published in outlets as diverse as Bitch, Elle, Essence, Jen, The Guardian, Literary Hub, Long Reads, Men's Health, The Nation, The New York Times, Vice, Vox, The Washington Post, The Week, Yes Magazine, and Zora. She is currently at work on book projects about Black Southern identity and food, and also the politics of abortion in Black America. Jordan Scruggs is a communicator and activist specializing in reproductive justice and LGBTQ rights. Jordan began advocating for LGBTQ in Tennessee through an anti-bullying campaign for LGBTQ youth in schools. For this work, they were honored with MTV's Logo Youth Trailblazer Award. The work also expands to leadership and work involving in the past, sparks reproductive justice, and current work with Health and Free Tennessee, as well as other local and nationwide nonprofit organizations. Today, Jordan's writing expands to fight for comprehensive reproductive health, education, and justice in Tennessee, as well as the life of being Black, queer, and non-binary. Amen to that, man. Alicia M. Walters is a writer, artist, coach, and facilitator on a mission to transform people and society by centering Blackness. She is the creator of Echoing Ida and contributor to the Echoing Ida collection. She is also the creator of the Black Thought Project, a global social experiment which creates public sanctuaries for Black expression. For this work, she received a Maker's Muse Award from the Kindle Project. Over the course of her career, she has written groundbreaking legislation and research to expose and repair the harms of criminalization on Black people. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Ebony, The Guardian, and CNN, among others. So wonderful to have you all here. We will be posting links in the chat function in case y'all may want to purchase copies of this amazing Echoing Ida collection. And let me just say, one copy is never enough. You're going to get this book and say, what I need to, you know how you do with amazing pieces of literature, you give them away. So save yourself the trouble, buy 4 or 5. Just cut to the chase, all right? And also, we're going to be, because I know y'all have questions. So at the end, the professor is going to be moderating some Q&A questions. So any questions you have, por favorcito, put them in the comments and we'll get to them towards the end of the reading, okay? So enough talk. Without further ado, por favorcito, help me to give a big Zoom Mundo welcome to Dr. Cynthia Greenlee, Jordan Scruggs, and Alicia M. Walters. Welcome to City Lights Live.
Thank you. Oh, Alicia, you're muted.
Yes, I couldn't unmute myself. Thank you all so much. Thank you to everyone at City Lights, Feminist Press, obviously. Cynthia, Jordan, it's such an honor to be here with you. And I'm just deeply grateful for all of you who are here, whose faces I can see, and those of you I can't. I just feel grateful that you're sharing your time, your energy, your attention with us. I know there's a lot of things on all the coasts and all the parts of this country and in your families and your lives that could pull your attention. And so I just appreciate you being here with us. It means you're giving your attention to Black women and Black non-binary people's stories. And this is the time, it's always the time to be doing that. So as Josiah mentioned, I'm the creator of Echoing Ida, and there's a beautiful and thoughtful origin story written by Janna Zinzi, one of the editors and a longtime participant and supporter of Echoing Ida, that's in the collection. And I wanted to just offer some words tonight as the creator of Echoing Ida to offer another perspective and give you a sense of the spirit, the labor, and the deep purpose and unfolding that has been Echoing Ida. Because when you pick up this anthology, I want you to know that you're not just holding a collection of individual disconnected stories. Each article, which these editors, Cynthia, Janna, and Kemi, have purchased back the rights to, represents a triumph for each and every writer. They are stories that some were once afraid to tell, perspectives that may have been unpopular, that once shared could risk an Ida's job, friendship, or family status. Behind each article, there is a story. Another Ida who read the shit draft, as we called it, painstakingly, lovingly edited, who encouraged the writer, who made a contact, who helped craft a pitch. Echoing Ida was not created in response to a political moment. As a communicator and organizer, as a policy advocate, I had worked on campaigns and passed legislation always aimed at improving some aspect of Black women's lives in particular. And yet when I looked at how Black women were being used to make the case, it was often white women, legislators, directors of major organizations, using us as pawns, saying, this disproportionately impacts Black women, when it was convenient. Telling our stories in the third person, parading our traumas to pull on heartstrings of people who loved everything about us but us. Or I would see a very few number of Black women who were allowed to speak on behalf of Black women. The anointed ones who were seen as legitimate sources to speak for Black women, the gatekeepers of which there could only be one or two, who designated only a few others in their stead. This limited pool of voices neglected to reflect the complexity, the brilliance of Black people's experiences, needs, and visions. Though I was a student of and believer in reproductive justice as a liberatory theory of change, one that recognized how central the control of Black women's bodies was to every oppressive system. And likewise, how if society prioritized our complete autonomy and material and cultural support, how liberated we would all be. So while I believed so deeply in this philosophy, and yet I was not an anointed one. Anyone who has ever spent significant, even brief time doing work in social movements knows there are fractures and factions. There is harm and rejection. I had experienced all of that in my short time doing this work, always feeling on the outside. And I hoped I was not alone. I thought, what if we could create a community where we as Black women, and later I evolved to understand the importance of including non-binary Black people and naming them in particular, thanks to the vision and patience of people like Kemi Alabi. What if we could build the trust with each other to be courageous enough to tell our own stories, to share our perspectives? What if we could build a network of Black women who are willing to share their contacts, help us understand the complex media landscape, how to pitch, the language and norms and expectations of publications and editors? What if we could actually learn together and not be afraid to try in public, to support each other? I didn't know necessarily how to do this thing that I had never done before or never experienced. And when I invited the first Idas to join me, there was just so much love and vulnerability. We were figuring it out together. We would brainstorm ideas on Fridays, read our work out loud. I would send multiple rounds of edits back and forth to different Idas. I had never edited before. I didn't get a journalism degree, or I didn't have a degree in English or English literature or anything of the sort. I didn't even go to good schools and like know grammar very well, but we ventured to do this anyway with love. And I remember those first tentative ideas. I remember Elizabeth Gay wanting to write about Black maternal health, wanting people to care about how Black mamas lived and died. during our first retreat in Atlanta, in an Atlanta hotel room overlooking an empty, dried up Olympic water park of some sort, I asked the Idas to write the beginnings of the story they longed to tell. And I remember there were Idas who didn't write anything for years. They had to work through their own grief, self-doubt, fear, trauma, just to put pen to paper. I would coach them, we would coach each other, we would encourage each other. I'd help them set goals and listen as they listed all the barriers that would make it so hard for them to do this. And now looking at this anthology, I see their pieces in print and I know how much it took for them to do that. We were not all born writers, nor did most Idas think of themselves as writers a lot of the time. Many of us don't do this for our careers. But for me, that was what Echoing Ida was always all about. What would it take for Black women, for Black non-binary folks, to tell the stories, to share the perspectives we long to, even though it might get us dragged, even though it caused tears to flow in the writing, even though it had nothing to do with our jobs and everything to do with our hearts. For us not to be spokespeople, but truth tellers, not called upon to schlep our trauma for all to gawk at. For it takes great courage to be seen and be heard. So from the very beginning, the space I intended to create and the space we cultivated together was one of love, where Idas knew they had someone to reach out to when they were scared about saying what they had to say, to bounce them back after rejection, and someone to dust them off when they got dragged. I wanted Echoing Ida to be a space where those of us who never felt like we belonged finally did. We were not all the same. We represented different lineages, regions, genders, and sexualities, abilities, and spiritual practices. Some of us were mixed, and some of us were, as Emma, I remember Emma always wearing this t-shirt that said Black mixed with Black. So we came from all over. We were of all different sorts of Blackness. We made mistakes. We hurt each other sometimes, we made up sometimes we didn't. We hugged, we wrote a lot of it down, and there are so many stories we still have to tell. We're not done. Our story is not over. So if I meant to speak of you to you of origins, I would say we are still just beginning. So please, when you read these articles, whether it's a personal story or an impassioned political statement, whether it's humorous or heartfelt, whether it's about abortion or cancer, food, or a pop star critique, know that there is not only one Ida in that piece, but a whole gaggle of sisters and siblings cheering them on, clanging a tambourine in the glory of the triumph of making it onto the page and into the world. And I'm going to read a piece, an excerpt of my one piece in this anthology that means a lot to me because it was in a moment that I realized that, you know, in all of this time with Echoing Ida, creating it and lifting other people up and wanting people to tell their own stories, and encouraging them that their story mattered. It wasn't until the Rachel Dolezal fiasco that made me realize that the story of a Black girl from Spokane, Washington actually mattered. Like, actually that very specific story had a place. And so I don't give her credit for that. But I give Echoing Ida and particularly Cynthia Greenlee, who encouraged me so much in this piece, many tearful moments on the couch, girl, I remember, to get this out into the world. And so I'm gonna read an excerpt from that piece, which is entitled, I became a Black woman in Spokane, but Rachel Dolezal, I was a Black girl first. Sucks teeth, okay. I was born in 1983, right in the middle of Spokane's first and only Black mayor's tenure, which spanned 1981 to 1985, cut short due to illness. A celebrated leader whom Black people worked hard to elect, and an example of an acceptable Black leadership, Mayor Jim Chase once told the local paper that he, quote, never knew much discrimination in Spokane. Well, that was perhaps true for him. It was not my family's Spokane. That was not my family's experience, nor the experience of the Black people who lived through segregation in the 1970s in Spokane. Though segregation was no longer enshrined in the law in the 1980s when I was growing up, Black folks still lived almost exclusively on the east side of town and in the historical neighborhoods built for railroad laborers. My Midwestern white mother and Black Puerto Rican father had moved to Spokane for college and defied the unspoken segregation by starting their family in a working class North Side neighborhood, away from the Black enclave, but hoping for the best. My father left the picture shortly after I was born, and my mother navigated the discrimination we faced in school and throughout town. I became familiar with the meaning of nigger quite early in life. As one of just 2 Black girls in my elementary school, my kinkyish hair, brown skin, and athletic build were uncommon. Before natural hair was considered cute, little white girls would shame me about the size of my poofy hair. Throughout elementary school, in the confines of my bedroom, I put champagne-colored slips over my head to mimic the straight blonde hair I thought I needed to fit in, gently swayed it back and forth, and dreamed of belonging. But I knew Black girls could never be white. When I was 10, my father, to the surprise and disgust of my mother, took me to the JCPenney salon in Seattle, shout out Zena, 300 miles away, to chemically straighten my hair and get my eyebrows and upper lip waxed. The first Black man in my life, he taught me that being a Black woman meant trying to conform to white standards of beauty. But when I was 14, I gave up the relaxers and transitioned into rocking my natural kinkyish afro. It instilled a new kind of confidence in me. I could not hang my head and wear this beautiful crown. My mother had not raised me to be an invisible go along to get along gal. And though I still harbored jealousy of my white peers and their incessant hair flipping, I decided to stand out instead of try and fail to fit in. I wore bright, creative clothing. Some things never change. I embraced my love of dance, of song, of sports, of speaking truthfully about race with little care for whether people attributed any of it to my Blackness or to me. Being able to get to a place where I could be myself made me feel powerful. I wanted to do and be everything. And as I learned more about the history of the Atlantic slave trade, African diaspora, and white privilege, I wanted to tell these white people about themselves. Realizing that I was hyper visible and yet never truly seen, I started a club called Helping Overcome Prejudice Everywhere, HOPE, with my brother. Each semester, my Spanish teacher would let me take over the class to lead my classmates through workshops on white privilege. It eventually became an established leadership course. On the surface, I was successful, but I longed for the recognition of fellow Black people, including my few Black male peers for whom I was seemingly non-existent. All of them, including my brothers, were busy chasing the hair flippers. We may have been teammates in track, or they might have been my brother's friends, but the boys who thought I would be my best, who I thought would be my best chance at external validation as an attractive woman, left me wanting. In Spokane in general, I rarely saw Black men coupled with Black women. More than a few men in our small Black community had white wives and girlfriends, while the Black women always seemed to be single. Naive, I imagined that on the tightly knit East Side, there were churches full of Black women who were coupled with and loved by Black men. But on the streets of Spokane, in the public spaces, at festivals, in restaurants, and wherever else I looked, Black and white men alike were always more interested in white women than women who looked like me. What I took from those years was that Black women were far from desirable partners. To be a Black young woman in Spokane was for me to be rejected, isolated, and left to find my own way. Becoming the Black woman I am today was not about learning a performance. It was not about certain clothing or my hair texture. It came from first being a Black girl, from the trauma of rejection and isolation, and its transformation into a kind of self-taught solitary pride from learning to preserve my own sense of true self. Dolezal managed to put on an identity, that of a Black woman, in a way that renders invisible the experiences that actually forged our identities as Black women. She presented to the world the trappings of Black womanhood without the burden of having lived it for most of her life. She represented us and gained status in both Black and white communities as one of us, even though she could have worn her whiteness and talked to white people about their racism, something sorely needed in a town like Spokane. Had she really understood the history of Black women in America, Dolezal would have recognized that she is perpetuating a fetish for Black women's bodies that devalues actual Black women while celebrating our parts when attached to the right, white form. But she was not alone in this act of playing Black and benefiting from it. Since Black womanhood is apparently all in the look, our society would rather have white former Disney pop stars twerk, talentless celebrities with enlarged backsides and their equally talentless siblings with swollen lips, than celebrate the Black woman's form with the person who carries it. Black women learn that we are not desirable, that we are invisible, and yet we are imitated by the world's Dolezals and in our popular culture. Little Black girls like me could never have passed for white and would have been ridiculed if we'd tried. But anyone with the right accessories can now seemingly claim to be a Black woman when it suits them. Spokane was, for once, perhaps just ahead of the curve. We might be moments away from declaring that simply wearing Black woman is enough to be a Black woman, or even preferable to it. Thank you.
Hey, so this is Cynthia. How are all y'all? I'm trying to figure out, I thought I knew what I was going to read, but I'm going to read you a selection that I'm going to read and dedicate to my two grandmothers who are no longer with us. My father's mother, who died of breast cancer when she was younger than I am and left behind 11 children. And my grandmother, Sylvester, who I did have in my life, who survived breast cancer and lived to be 97. So, and I wanted to read this essay because I want to just make clear that reproductive justice isn't solely about abortion politics or the more popular things in the framework, and that the founders of that movement thought about things a lot more holistically than we tend to, even if we consider ourselves part of that movement. And so, and also lived experience. And my lived experience has been in the most recent years, largely about healthcare and survival and grief. And so I wanted to do this piece for them. And so this is for Grandma Grace, Grandma Florence, and Grandma Sylvester. Okay. So it's called For My Mother, A Day Without Cancer. So, and you can look, if you have the book or you see it, you can see a picture of little baby me with my little matching fro with my mama. Okay, so this is Miss Betty, who is not here tonight, thank goodness, because oh my God, I can read with her here. Okay, so when I found a lump in my breast several years ago, I couldn't bear to tell my mother. She was already walking in the shadow of cancer, not because she had it herself, but because she had become a cancer caregiver. My family tree is blighted with cancer. My paternal grandmother had a radical mastectomy in rural North Carolina in the 1940s, a procedure that left her with an open weeping wound where her breast had been. It never healed. Family legend said she couldn't find a white doctor. There was no Black doctor for miles to take her as a patient. She went instead to the local veterinarian, who referred her to a white doctor who didn't let race get in the way of his oath to do no harm. On that same side of the family, a great-grandfather shot himself to death after a cancer diagnosis, an act of deadly pragmatism to avoid his cell's painful betrayal. My mother and cancer taught me much of what I know about caring and caregiving. When I was a child, relatives recovered from cancer-related procedures at our house. My Aunt Johanna lived in the North Carolina mountains and needed life-extending treatment only available 5 hours away, but it was closer to our house. My mother worked nights as a nurse, but was up in the morning to drive Aunt Johanna, who stayed in our spare bedroom, to drive her to doctor's appointments another hour away. Sister-in-law number 2, my father had 7 sisters, 5 of whom had breast cancer, recovered from her biopsy in my sister's bedroom And when another of my father's sisters was diagnosed, my mother drove over immediately to the next town and took over the kitchen because we're Black and Southern, and we believe that food, even the food that will clog your arteries, can temporarily beat back a crisis. That's right. And my mother did it all with a gracious smile, with a gentle smile and genuine graciousness. I inherited her smile, but I only imitate her graciousness. So in late 2008, I guess that was around the time that I met Alicia and we started connecting. And kind of the pre-echoing Ida was going on. My mother's oldest sister, my Aunt Mary, didn't make it to our family Christmas gathering a few miles from our family home in Lake City, South Carolina. So we knew something was terribly wrong. She was not going to miss Christmas with my grandmother's chocolate cake, with the special punch, with all those things. So she'd been suffering from some leg problems that her primary care physician said were just arthritis. Just arthritis turned out to be soft tissue sarcoma, an exceedingly rare cancer. So we found a sarcoma expert 4 hours away at Duke University near my home in Durham, North Carolina. And though he was considered an expert, he had only seen 17 of those tumors in his entire career. And he was excited to see one so large. Now, as offensive as that may sound, we were grateful that his case piqued her case piqued his interest, because even if he saw her as little more than a mass of cells and not as my beloved aunt or the person that she was, the Sunday school superintendent, the woman who held us all together, maybe he could save her life, if only for science. So this began my mother's all-out crusade to save her sister. Fresh from retirement, my mother relocated to my sister's apartment near the hospital and took care of Aunt Mary while we waited for the diagnosis and endured the cycle of boomerang hospitalization. Mom juggled all the appointments, the ambulance rides, the insurance claims, the calls from relatives, some of who were real mad that she had taken Mary so far away. My sisters and I did the heavy lifting of turning Aunt Mary in the bed, getting her to the bathroom, attending to her comfort when we all knew her life was hanging in the balance. But I mostly brought food because I wasn't a great caregiver, especially the soft serve ice cream that she loved. I held her hand and I tried to talk in an overly bright voice about everyday things. So, long story short, my Aunt Mary did not survive that cancer. And so I'm skipping to the end of this piece. So for the record, I came from a family where you were told not to say the word hate. You didn't hate anything. You didn't hate anybody. You just didn't like it. Right. But for the record, I hate cancer with the violence that surprises me. I hate that Black women are struck with more virulent types of breast cancer. And I hate the health disparities that mean we get less and later treatment. That said, I also can't stand that breast cancer tends to be all people think about when they think about women and cancer. I detest that rare cancers aren't common enough or lucrative enough for more research into their causes and cures. I was angry that I couldn't see my mother as much as I used to because she was doing the work of keeping other loved ones alive, often to the detriment of her own health. And then I felt ugly and selfish for all of those thoughts and the moments where I had to insist I had to do my own work, live my own life, and take care of myself. I hate that cancer left gaping holes in my family tree and that, chances are it will one day invade my own body. But so far, I've been lucky. That lump was nothing more than the patently unglamorous lumpy breast syndrome. So more than anything, I hate that my mother, who is in her 70s and is my best friend, except, she's like, you're my child, not my friend, but she's my best friend, is spending her twilight years tethered in place by cancer. And I hate that people, some family people, all, kinfolk ain't kinfolk really, who do nothing to help salute her and say that she's strong. She's a strong Black woman. I know from experience that cancer kills strong Black women. I know that what doesn't kill you, caregiving, for instance, can make you sick. And I'll pass it over to Jordan.
All right. Yeah, thank you. I'll just mention at how much I've grown during retreat spaces with Idas and also after this. It's very interesting comparison to where I am now as to when I wrote some of these things that are in the anthology. And I would love it if y'all could see just how diverse and just how beautiful these multiple stories are in our anthology. I'm going to be reading How Prince Helped Me Be Black and Genderqueer in America's Bible Capital. This was my first piece I actually wrote as an Ida, and it still sticks with me daily. I still remember when Prince sang on Muppets Tonight in 1997. I was 7 years old in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was a few years after he started using a symbol instead of his name, which the Muppets played up for laughs. I remember him wearing overalls in one scene for a farm skit and a ridiculous chartreuse turtleneck for a music video in the next. Even the Muppetified Prince had a pompadour. I watched him sing about Cynthia, a Muppet who didn't care what people thought about her. If you set your mind free, baby, you'd understand. And after that, I wanted more. I looked for Prince in music stores and online. I'll never forget seeing the cover of his 1988 album, Love Sexy. Here was this naked Black man on a cover of his album with flowers behind him. And people loved him. So did I. Purple Rain helped me to understand the turmoil I was going through when a relationship ended differently than I hoped. Little Red Corvette was there to remind me to take time with my life. But it's the opening line from I Would Die For You that knocked me out. It struck me so hard and stayed with me because it was my life. And when I heard it, I realized it was okay to feel that way. I'm not a woman. I'm not a man. I am something that you'll never understand. As I went deeper into the catalog, I found Prince in similar poses with the same aura of pride as on Love Sexy. Prince had a magical blend of masculinity and femininity that I was searching for but couldn't find within my own community or anywhere else, really. You see, Chattanooga is a very religious city. I went to church nearly every Sunday for about 20 years. We have more churches per capita than schools. In fact, in 2016, the American Bible Society named my hometown the most Bible-minded city in America. My family encouraged me to be proud of being Black, proud of where I came from, and proud of the space I take up in this world. But I never felt as confident as other family members when it came to their identities. My parents surrounded me with people who are the definitions of strength, but not like Prince. I was at work when I heard the news. I checked Twitter offhandedly and saw a tweet about a death at Prince's studio. Y'all, we were all thinking the same thing. I gasped and stepped back from the computer. I refreshed Twitter over and over again, looking for a source other than TMZ. When the Associated Press confirmed the news, I screamed and sank to the floor. My white coworkers didn't understand how real I was being when I said my gut felt torn and my heart was racing. I couldn't accept it. He had been such a big part of my childhood and adolescence. Prince let me see a person who wore makeup and whatever clothes he wanted, not caring whether his choices fit the gender binary. The only conversation about sexuality I heard growing up was about abstinence. There was no talk of gender identity or even being queer. There was no place I could reach out to for more information besides the public library because I didn't have internet access at home. I didn't know how my family felt about anything beyond the heterosexual world where I was raised. They never shamed or spoke badly about people. They just didn't discuss it. So it wasn't until I got older that I was able to put a description of genderqueer on myself. I could see and understand this concept of not being a man or not a woman in Prince, but I didn't understand what it was called. I rarely felt comfortable in my own physical body. I felt isolated. I still feel isolated, even though I'm surrounded by love and support. Family and friends can support me in every way, but they'll never really understand my gender identity, which makes me feel apart. Prince understood. He was what I was missing. He was unapologetic, sexy, proud, genderless. It's what I'm still working on right now. Even as I got older, There was no one out there who was as confident about their beyond the gender binary persona. There was no music I connect to. There was no music I could connect to as much as I connected to Prince's. I found a North Star in Prince because he showed me the power of my genderqueer body. Prince let me see a person who wore makeup and whatever clothes he wanted, not caring whether his choices were gendered. Prince created both transcendent music and his own identity, and he did neither for anyone's approval nor opinion. That's brave as hell. He continued to inspire me when he joined Janelle Monáe on her second album, Electric Lady. It was a perfect match. Like Prince, one of her musical forebears, Monáe is unapologetic about her Blackness and sexual identity. She too is a pocket-sized revolution who is changing the game in a creative and bold way. From the way she composed her album, interludes to her dedication to her family's labor history in her outfits. And that's all I'm going to read tonight, because I want you all to dive more deeply into this anthology when you purchase it from the City Lights, because it's just so incredible. And I'm getting chills all over again just reading from this anthology and hearing Cynthia dive into her piece, as well as Alicia's beginning of all of this and how we all came together. So yeah.
So hey y'all, we want to open up to you all and get any feedback or questions, because we're here and we're open and we should talk, right? We've been talking at you, but we should talk. So put some questions in the chat for us, or your snaps, applause, approval, all that stuff. And I mean, while you think about it, if you have any questions or comments, I would like to, I guess, throw out to Alicia and Jordan, like what you think, how you think you changed since you went to Echoing Ida. We all came in a different way, right? I came because Alicia invited me after we met. And I was kind of Echoing Ida 1.0. They're kind of different generations. We call ourselves the OGs. But I'd like to hear like you share like a formative moment. Like Alicia, we heard you say that you realized how important your voice was during that, moment of Rachel Dolezal, who should not be named. But I'm wondering if you could share another moment. And let's start with you, Jordan.
Ooh, I definitely say, yeah, this was my first piece. I believe it was after my first retreat with Echoing Ida that Prince died unexpectedly. And I remember just in us discussing and how we uplift and have confidence in ourselves and our work and our stories, that, not everything is for social. If you have something to say, write it out, tell the whole part of it instead of just, I wrote this piece after writing 2 tweets about how this impacted me how his death impacted me as a genderless, as a non-binary genderqueer person. And I remembered the fact that no one else has this story, no one else has this lived experience, and it made me want to write more about it. And someone else saw it, and the growth that I had within like a week, and then the growth in which I had within a year, and then another year, and like even now, like I cannot put into words properly the growth in which I have as a creative, as a writer, as just a Black non-binary genderqueer person. Yeah, it's incredible. And Charmaine, absolutely. Charmaine, for those of you who don't know, is one of the she was in the cohort with me as an Ida, and we've shared many memories together in the Echoing Ida group and then beyond it. And that's pretty much what has happened within this cohort, I guess I should say.
And I need to give a shout out to Jordan, because if you read this anthology, and you know what, y'all, I'm not going to expect you're going to read every single piece, but I hope you will. I mean, I think you'll get a really good view of the diversity within this group and within Black women. But Jordan's pieces are really unique because so many of them are collaborative. And so Jordan really, really took to heart the idea of working with other people, and you see that manifest in all of their pieces in some way or another. Many of these pieces are collaborative. Charmaine said read everything. Okay, all right now. But these pieces are not one-off pieces, and even though there may be a single author who did the lion's share of the work and the ideation, they really are, most of these pieces are a collaborative effort where Alicia was reading pieces, I was reading pieces, Charmaine was reading my pieces, and so they are really, this anthology is not just a book, it's a collection of relationships. And I want to shout out Jordan because Jordan's pieces express that in such a way, and more than anybody else's. And so I'm just glad to be with you, Jordan.
Well, thank you, Cynthia.
Okay, there's a question. I know, Alicia, you may have a moment. You want to share a moment and then we'll get to Dahlia's question?
I think, and it might speak to it a little bit, but I think this piece around just what it takes to do this, how important the kind of sisterhood and siblinghood part of this, the community part of this is. I remember, I had spent so much time supporting other people and being like, encouraging them and figuring, helping them figure out the process and wanting them and encouraging their voice so much. And when it was my turn, I was a wreck. Like I was a complete wreck. So, pitching a piece, publishing it, seeing it, there's so much that's out of your control. They put in a story that was about me, they put Rachel Dolezal's picture on it, on The Guardian, which was like such a sad, right? I ended up on CNN and my stomach was constantly in knots. Just what it takes to put yourself out there in such a vulnerable way and to have a community to fall back on and to hold you through it it's not a training program. It's not. What's that?
Can I interrupt you and draw attention a little bit, Alicia, to Dahlia's comment that you put on CNN? I want y'all to understand because, the anthology is a moment in time, right? And Alicia probably did the first really big media appearance on TV of any Ida. And like, we were all around the country watching, okay? There was a text chain that was going off. She popped her neck on CNN. This woman tried to get smart with her. And she was like, oh no, see, I have answers for you, okay? And it was beautiful. Yes, it was righteous. It was beautiful because Alicia had done so much of the background work, making sure that people's stuff was tight. Sometimes rewriting people's stuff and saying, you can't do this. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead, call you out for that, Alicia. Okay, so let's just—
I didn't know what I was doing. I did a little much. Go ahead.
But always saying you can do this and you have some expertise and you deserve to be heard and we're gonna make sure you are. But like that, I think was one of like the really critical moments where, even though we weren't in the same space, we saw Alicia out there speaking for herself and speaking for all of us. And so, I mean, it's one of the moments that I think the most about as like just pure, and I hate the hashtag Black Girl Magic. I'm just gonna tell y'all, but because I think it's not Black Girl Magic, I think it's Black woman labor. Okay. But that was pure Black girl magic. It was Alicia Walter's magic. So
that's so sweet. Thank you. Yeah, that was huge. That was definitely a big moment of community and it coming out. And I think it's never done alone. And it's also really scary. So just want to give props to all of the Idas, who put a piece out there. And this isn't even all of them. Like there's
300 some pages of pieces. Like, I think, we're not all about the productivity hamster wheel, right, y'all? Right. We believe we all need rest, but Echoing Ida put out, we don't even know how many pieces at this point we put out over the years, actively through the program or not. So we're still doing it, right? We're still out there. So I want to make sure we get to Dahlia's question.
I think you should start on that, Cynthia.
Oh, this one? Oh, child. This question. So can you talk about your approach to writing solitary communal combo and how you balance getting support from EI and finding your voice? So for me, I think the beauty of Echoing Ida is that we have folks who didn't see themselves as writers, some people who were very beginning writers, some people who found writing as a very comfortable identity. And writing was always a comfortable identity for me. I co-published a really terrible children's book that really my mother probably wrote most of it when I was 5 years old. And so that was the beginning of my publishing life. And it was about a chameleon changing colors. But anyway, so, I mean, my writing practice, I mean, it's always solitary, but it is always collective at the same time. So, you know, even to this day, I write with some IDAs and friends on Zoom, silent writing with each other. We talk about ideas. IDAs and I did what we called our, you know, our writing sprints, where, you know, for a stretch of 2 weeks, we got together to write virtually before the pandemic. And my writing is mostly rooted in, I write things because I'm curious. I write things because I'm mad. I'm a very anger motivated writer. Even if I don't stay in that place, usually writing helps get me out of it. And I think, like, for me, EI ultimately, you know, I came to it because I do history of reproductive health and Black girlhood specifically. I'm a legal scholar. I'm a legal historian of Black girlhood. And I came for one thing, but I kind of left with the idea that I could reframe my experience. And so I came in doing one thing, my interest shift, and I was able, largely through a lot of coaching and like real deliberate thought that came from EI, to like say, I want to do some different stuff. And then to cast myself and project myself in spaces where I wasn't known or that weren't natural for me. And so, you know, I largely transitioned from writing about reproductive health to writing about food and basically anything I damn near wanted to write about. And I mean, I think that's actually the lesson for me, was that I can write about anything I want. I can write about the way I want. And, you know, if no one ever publishes it or reads it, I'm still happy with it. But I can write shit and get it published and get paid.
And I would say there's, you know, not having originally the identity of a writer, and having the assumption or the like image in my head that a writer is a solitary person and it's a solitary act. And I think a lot of the work we had to do together was we had to come up with that term shit draft. Like in our first retreat in that Atlanta hotel room, we had to be like, you have to share your shit draft. And then we had to have like levels of shit where be like, okay, so like the real shit, like just work on that a little bit and then send like the next level of shit to the person, right? Like give them something to work with, right? But
but you know, that was my term. You know, it was my term.
I know. Cynthia was like, there's too much shit out here. So, but we had to create a culture where we could just share with each other. And that was so hard. That was part of the vulnerability. It was like, this isn't perfect. It's not worked out. And accepting that, like, actually, this is part of the process. It's part of the process to share your work. It's part of the process. Not that you have to collaborate on every word. I think the balance I had to find as an editor that I made myself, because that was the thing that was needed, was not giving too much of my voice into somebody's writing. Like really, and that's a hard, you know, line for me not to cross, because I want it to, I feel so passionate. I have like sympathy passion or something. Like I adopt somebody else's passion for the thing and I feel it and I'm like, oh, this is how it translates for me, but that's not their voice. So it's this really interesting dance and balance of supporting people to find their own voice. But I think writing, I've learned so much more, it's not a fully solitary act. Like it's best when it is with deep feedback and lots of reworking, and that's okay. But we have to be willing to be open to that.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we all have thought about intellectual property and what it means, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are moments when you claim something as yours, and there are moments where things are not claimable because they really were collectively conceived. And so I want to make sure we see Nicole's question, and anybody who wants to answer it, address it. Is there a topic that you want to expand upon through more writing in the future? Because we, like I said, this anthology is a little frozen in time. It's a moment in time, a snapshot of all this work, but people still work and we still doing.
Yeah, I personally, I want to look back. Not the first time, like I looked at the pieces that I have in this anthology again after I put them in the anthology was when I got the physical copy in my hands, and I was like, oh, we've grown. Okay, we've evolved a bit, and like I would love to just because speaking of like collaboration, like that Prince piece I just read, Cynthia helped me pull that out when I was like, help, I wrote 2 tweets and now someone wrote me to write a piece. And now I don't know it. But the pulling back. And so I want to come to the stuff that I've written about. Like, what does it mean? And like, I love, Cynthia, that you talked about how you've gone beyond legal and historical and stuff like that. And I too want to write on food, because I'm very big into food and very big into the Southern culture, because Chattanooga, Tennessee, born and raised. I know some of you have probably seen me sipping water from my mason jar. It's one of like 7 that's in my room right now. I too want to write and expand. I just want to expand so much more on stuff I haven't talked about that is my truth and like my history and my identity and my culture. Because there's so much depth within the South and like the power in Black Southerners. And I just, I want us to be more than just, the Georgia vote that we're looking at and watching, and more than the Stacey Abrams. I want it to be more, and I want all the things. And so I'm so excited to keep going.
We deserve all the things, Jordan. Thank
all
you
the
for
things.
the shout out to the
Yes.
South. I mean, I think that was important for me too. I mean, it's important that not everybody who knows about Echoing Ida, well, you may not know that Echoing Ida was all over the country, that there were Idas in New Mexico, in Milwaukee. Charmaine lived in Milwaukee, in California,
Ohio.
North Carolina, Ohio, Georgia.
Florida.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, everywhere. And so, and Alicia wanted to talk about grieving. And I think that's a really important thing, because, Black people haven't been given room to grieve before the next, indignity or human rights abuse. So, Alicia, did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking a lot about, so the work that I do now centers Blackness, is looking at centering Blackness and what that holds for personal and collective transformation. And I think, how do we practice centering Blackness in public? And one of the ways I'm interested in looking at that is, what is a collective healing practice? What is a collective healing that centers Blackness in public look like? What would the impact of that be? Were it safe for Black people to grieve in public, to be witnessed, to be honored in that? What does that open up for all of our collective grief? What does that open up for healing? And so looking at that, centering Blackness in these different ways, and a way to talk about and look at grief and healing that isn't one-dimensional in terms of trauma, that the story of Blackness is not solely a story of trauma. It's a story of many things, and that the overcoming of trauma, the healing through trauma, the resilience, the joy, all of the things, the multidimensionalness of it, and how interrelated it is. So to see it from that lens. So I'm interested in that.
I'm interested in the same, but also from a pretty personal lens. I have a book proposal that goes up for auction to be sold to a publisher. Hopefully somebody will buy it like in the next month. And the manuscript is about Black Southern identity, food, love, and loss. And so hopefully it will actually become a real thing and not just a proposal. But there's also
it's gonna be a real thing. It's gonna be a real big thing.
Let's hope, right? But we gotta write it first, right? You gotta write it first. So I wanted to make sure we got to Cynthia's question, because Cynthia is sitting on an opinion piece and just wanted to know about kind of, work process. How do you get started? Well, can I start a little bit with that? So Cynthia, and I'm like, can I see you, Cynthia? Okay, you got your camera off, which is fine, no pressure. I get my butt in the seat and I commit to a certain amount of writing most days of the week. And so sometimes it might be 20 minutes, like if that's all I can squeeze in. A lot of times I have a full-time job. So a lot of times I don't have to be at work until 10. A lot of times it's between 8 and 10. So I can do that. But I also, if I'm having problems starting, and like looking at the blank document is hard for me a lot. If I'm looking at Microsoft Word or whatever, or Google Docs, I start typing an email because somehow that makes it lower stakes for me to feel like I'm writing it for a friend. And then I just do that for a while until I start to see the shape of something. And it tricks my brain into thinking that like, this isn't like professional writing. This is just something fun. I'm sending to my friend. That's how I get started. But I also do a lot of research, and the research is fun for me. So find what's fun for you too. Anybody else have thoughts about your writing process?
I legitimately look for a song, and I go to my Spotify. I have about 50 playlists on Spotify for different moods, and I'll pick a playlist. I'll pick a playlist that kind of has the mood that I'm in when this idea pops in my head, and I will go into the notes app on my phone, and I would just start ranting to my phone, and then it'll be all out of order completely, because ideas will just I have ADD and ADHD, so my thoughts are already pretty sporadic, and so I try to get all the thoughts and all the things I'm feeling down, just almost in bullet points, and then I'll come back a day or two later, and I'll try to flush out those points that I have, and I'll switch the playlist to a chill step type of calm zen situation where I can actually focus on the words and the thoughts of my opinion instead of the lyrics. I love a good angry playlist if I'm feeling in a ranty mood. It gets me going real hype. But then if I put the chill step on, I'm not focused on the words and singing along and making up choreography. I'm writing on my opinion. So that always helps me.
Love that. I'm in early morning, especially pandemic times, like 6 a.m., meditate, start writing. Or is it appropriate? Yeah, it's 2 p.m. It's time for a cocktail and I'm going to write. So it's kind of a both and what kind of mood I'm, but the other thing is nature and actually talking it out first. So I'll do a hike and just kind of get a lot of thoughts out, talking to myself, and do a voice memo, and then come home and like riff on that. So just to get me something to get me started, right? And I love that, writing a letter, thinking you're talking to a girlfriend, Cynthia. I'm gonna answer Maria's question. Hi, Maria. So good to see you. Maria has supported Echoing Ida for so many years, during retreats and so many logistics, sending people money, stipends, coordinating childcare, blah, 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 like 1,000 million things. So thank you so much for all your work. I appreciate you. I feel like I shouldn't say this, but it's so good to go to the very end and read the letters between Cynthia and Charmaine. That to me is, I wrote it just before I got on here and cried. And it just goes into the heart and the beauty of what Echoing Ida is deeply about, which is relationships. As Cynthia said, this is the book of relationships. This is the book of love. This is the book of turmoil and everything that comes with it. But those letters to me really represent what's possible in repairing and in transformation and in the deep vulnerability and honesty and accepting our imperfections. And I feel like that's so much of the story of Echoing Ida, and each of us is like, it wasn't easy. We were not perfect, still aren't, but you know, there's deep love. And so I would go right to the end and cry, have a good cry, and call a friend afterwards, or write them a note and say, I love you.
Wow. Oh, I hate interrupting. I feel terrible. We're out of time. Even in the Zoom Mundo, there's limited time. Y'all, everybody here, por favorcito, give a big shout out and love. Do that jazz hands, clap, do whatever you want for our very special guests tonight, Dr. Cynthia Greenlee, Jordan Scruggs, and Alicia M. Walters, y'all. Man, that was incredible. And also, it's because of Jordan, I'm gonna have to go YouTube Starfish and Coffee after this. And also, please, y'all, give yourselves a pat on the back and a little kiss on the cheek for tuning into the Zoom Mundo for this. What a beautiful community. If I may be so bold, what a chingon group of Idas.
Hey!
Serious. And if any of y'all have not purchased your 5 copies of the book, por favorcito, go into the link because not only does it help distribute this wonderful work of love and labor, it also helps the bookstore tremendously because we are in those pandemic times and you don't want to imagine this United States landscape without bookstores in them. So
Yes.
por favorcito, y'all support us all. And God, thank you all so much. Thank you all, Dr. and Jordan and Alicia. If y'all have any parting words, I'm gonna just leave it to y'all, okay?
All right.
I feel really complete. Thank you all so much. This has been beautiful. It's good to see your faces. Get 7 copies. It's a good number, right?
10. 10's a good number.
10. And
10.
shout out to Jordan. Was that your mom on the chat?
My mom is on the chat. Yes, probably. Hi, Mom. She just, you can't hear her, but she yelled hi from downstairs. So hi, Mom.
I love you. I love y'all. Do you want to say anything, Cynthia? You're muted. Or are you putting something in the chat? I know.
Okay, well,
Okay.
Okay, I'm off mute. So I'm just gonna say thank you all for sharing your Wednesday night with us, and and we hope that there will be some nugget of something in the anthology that will speak to you, and it may not be the things you expect, and I think that's the beautiful thing of it.
And also, let me just say in closing, for those of you that want to rewatch this amazing event, it's going to be posted in a couple days on our YouTube channel at the bookstore. And anyone else that's missed it, send it to them, do them a big favor. So this has been a live broadcast in the Zoom Mundo from City Lights Bookstores, where on our wall it says, Printers Ink is the greatest explosive. All you beautiful people, have a beautiful night. I really hope to see y'all soon. Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Night.